Joining us now on the John Fredericks Radio Network, State Senator Fairfax, Chap Petersen. Senator Petersen, great to have you, sir.
John, thanks for having me on.
You're on the cutting edge of everything, even the Redskins drafts. You're always so far ahead of the curve. You also said that the Nats would beat my Astros in 7 games.
Yeah, who thought that would happen?
Much to my chagrin, your prediction came true. We didn't cheat. Perfect baseball. By the way, Chap, best thing for the Astros this season, if they play, no fans. We can't get booed.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, you know what? That's funny that whole Astros controversy has just gone completely off the radar screen.
I know, right?
I did a town hall on Zoom, which I hate Zoom, by the way. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And people were asking questions about the 2020 session. I'd forgotten all about it. I was like, we did what?
Yeah.
So, anyways, I assume, go ahead and ask your questions. So thanks for being on. I hope everybody's well out there. And you're in the beach today?
No, I'm in Richmond, but we're waiting to know when your annual week of Virginia Beach is.
Soon. I'm going to be down there in late June, and then probably in August. I sometimes I pop down there on weekends,
right?
Just because there's fewer events to do in Fairfax. But I get down. I've got some clients down there, and obviously Sharon and I have a place down there, and I love it. Love the beach, baby. Love it.
I'm going to find out from Kathy when you go, and we're going to crash your deal down there. I always tell this story. It was about 48 years ago. I'm out swimming with my son, and I just bump into Chap like in the water.
Yeah, you and John was like floundering around in the water. I thought you were drowning. I was going to dive in and get you.
He just bumped into him. I was like, Chap, is that you? Oh my goodness. Anyway, all right. Let's get to let's start with your lawsuit.
Sure.
You're suing the governor because you're saying that he's beyond his constitutional rights. Explain.
Sure. Well, and start with the fact that I'm a lawyer and I have clients, and my clients are in almost all cases businesses, which is to say small, medium-sized businesses. And in this case, I had 2 businesses. One was a wedding event, an agritourism place, so basically a farm in western Loudoun County that holds weddings, and they've been shut down since March. And then the second is a restaurant. It's a Japanese-style restaurant, although the owner's a Korean-American woman. Both are longtime clients of mine, and both have been shut down by the governor's executive orders. And even with the reopening criteria, they really have no possibility of making money or operating. So they were on the verge of going out of business. And I've looked at these executive orders. I've had the opinion from really the first week that they were not justified under the Constitution, that they exceed the governor's emergency authority under Title 44, that under the communicable disease chapter, which talks about quarantine and isolation under Title 32.1, it has specific findings that need to be made. None of those findings have been made. Even those findings talk about least restrictive means. So if you're going to lock one person up in the house, you have to, first of all, show scientifically that they're a threat to society, and secondly, that you have to show that they're still given civil liberties and done so in the least restrictive way. None of those findings have been made. Instead, we've had executive orders that have basically just shut businesses down, shut people up in their homes, prohibited them from going to church, prohibited them from going to school. We've never had anything like this in Virginia. And so, like everybody else, I sort of had my own thoughts and sort of sat on them for about a month, and then as we got further into the pandemic, I wrote letters, I wrote op-eds, I appeared on radio programs and expressed this opinion and had conversations at various times with the governor's staff where basically like, yeah, well, that's your opinion. And so, finally I just said enough's enough. And, I did have clients that were willing to pay me. I'm not doing this pro bono. I do, I work, this is my living. And so I filed this petition, and I can tell you, from the day I filed it, which was Tuesday, till this morning, my phone has been ringing off the hook. And it's attorneys saying, how can I get your petition? What can I do? What can I file? And I tell them, whatever I've done is like open source software. I'll send it to you in Word. And my email is jcp@petersenfirm.com. That's my law firm email. And I will send it out to you. Represent your clients to the best of your ability. Get into county court. get into federal court. I filed 2 actions. I filed a mandamus in the Virginia Supreme Court so I can get in front of the Supreme Court and have them rule on it because, in my opinion, it's a constitutional crisis and we need a ruling immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second lawsuit I filed in federal court because it's a takings. It's a violation of my client's property rights without due process.
Mm-hmm.
And so far the state court system has not reacted to that. So I filed in 2 places at once, and we'll see which one reacts first. But, as I said in my press conference, there's a very simple remedy to this, and that is if the governor just says, I'm repealing the executive orders and I'm going to call the legislature back into session, and we can debate these. And if we pass certain rules and measures, I might vote against them. Some I might vote for. But at least we'd have a democratic process. Now, even then, you could still have a takings because you're taking somebody's private property without due process.
Mm-hmm.
But at least let's have a democratic process as opposed to 90 days of just imperial edicts. That's not how this is supposed to work.
Well, that's the way it is working. Nobody seems to want to stop them. The Republicans are incapable of it. They're basically neutered. There's no opposition, so he can do whatever he wants. So the opposition's coming now from his own ranks, like yourself, because it's unconstitutional. It's hurting businesses. So what are the chances you get a hearing in front of the Virginia Supreme Court and you actually get a ruling anytime soon?
Well, yeah, that's a great question because when I was in Richmond, Richmond right now is basically a shutdown city.
Right.
You go down there and there's graffiti sprayed on the walls of the Supreme Court. There's graffiti on the walls of the Pocahontas building. It's sad, and it makes me sad.
Yeah,
and
sad.
I'm talking to the state Capitol Police down there. I think, again, I don't want to presume anything. They're going through a lot right now, but I feel like there's a bunker mentality in the city of Richmond. And thank God in Fairfax County, things are, I don't want to say back to normal, but people are moving around, people are driving around, people are not in fear of their lives, and so your question was, when can I get a hearing in front of the Virginia Supreme Court? As soon as possible. I'm ready to argue it now, and I'm ready to talk about the points. I think the points are self-evident. Again, the Virginia Code, when it speaks to emergency, it defines it as a period of time when the governor doesn't have time to call back the legislature, and that would have made sense in mid-March. It doesn't make sense now.
But
we're 90 days in.
there's we're 90 days in, going to $120. Senator Chap Petersen, with us filing a lawsuit against the governor on behalf of several of his clients, joined in that by Dave LaRocque, Republican House of Delegates member who was on earlier. Chap Petersen, though, 2 things. It's been 90 days, going to 120, but there's nothing in the statute that gives a time limit.
Right. Well, the statute doesn't give a time limit, but again, if you look at the definition of emergency, it talks about the time when the governor the governor basically can do this when he's unable to call the legislature back into session. And remember, statutes are controlled by the Constitution, and the Constitution itself says under Article 1, Section 7, the governor cannot suspend the laws. And that's basically what's happened. We have a set of laws that regulate businesses. They've been suspended. And the Constitution, which overrides all of this, is you cannot suspend the laws. And that's effectively what's happened, that we've suspended our ordinary rule of law. We've walked into this emergency situation, and we've just continued it indefinitely. And if it's continued indefinitely, who's to say that you couldn't say, well, global warming's an emergency? Well, racism's an emergency. Well, I don't name it. Economic recession's an emergency.
Potholes are an emergency.
You can name whatever you want.
Yeah.
Smoking's an emergency. One of the points I made is we probably have more people die of smoking-related illnesses than COVID, but we haven't banned cigarettes. It's completely arbitrary how these decisions are being made. And again, if you call us back into session and the legislature debates this and these bills get passed, okay, it is what it is, but at least the elected representatives had a chance to weigh in on it. And that hasn't happened.
Well, that was a discussion I had with Dave. Like, what is Dave LaRocque? What is the objective of this? Whatever the lockdown measures are and whatever power the governor has, the House is going to sanction it. So that's like a waste of my time. But then you get to the Senate, and as we saw in 2020, although you don't remember it, seems so long ago, and I agree with that. That was the deliberative body. I mean, when people say, the House is a mob, the Senate is a deliberative. If you didn't see that in 2020, I mean, the number of crazy things you guys just threw out was
Right.
off the chart. I'm just crazy stuff. It's just nonsense. And you guys, I mean, it was indeed a deliberative body, and that's what everybody looked to the state Senate for. Logic and rationality. Didn't get a lot of that in the House, but as you said, it'll still be debated in the Senate. If they strike this stuff down, it's over. So if it's struck down, though, between Supreme Court strike down and the special session sanctioning new OK orders, the governor has no power, right?
Right. I think what could happen is what's happened in a lot of other states where, and I think even in Michigan they had a recent court decision where the Supreme Court, or whatever their highest court is called, simply strikes down the executive order and says, you know what, this is not based on the constitutional power, or it's not been blessed by the legislature, and we're going to strike it. Now, they may suspend that order for a few days so the governor has time to call the legislature back into session. That's kind of a middle ground approach, saying, okay, here's our opinion, but we're not actually going to issue this order until you have 7 days or whatever to call the legislature back. Or like in Wisconsin, they just struck it down.
Yeah, they just struck it down, and then the mayor of Milwaukee, I guess he has authority under that statute, so he kept Milwaukee in lockdown. But the rest of the state,
Right.
That day at midnight, they opened up the bars, and of course, look, I'm not going to get into this on this call, but there's no body bags in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in cul-de-sacs like everybody said there'd be. But that's a whole nother story. So I get what you're doing. You just want due process. You want the legislator to weigh in. The governor doesn't have this authority. Looks like, Chap, you're moving in the right direction. Let's get to a couple other topics here.
Yeah.
Statues coming down. Now, there's two things. You can vote in council and the legislator to get rid of them, and then they're done in a way that is within the boundaries of what everybody says. That's what they did in New Orleans. The mayor went with it, the council voted for it, the governor signed it, and people came and they took them down and put them in a museum, got out of the New Orleans square. In Richmond, they're just being toppled with ropes, and Christopher Columbus tossed in the lake. Jefferson Davis yesterday knocked down. Somebody tries to take Lee down. People are going to die. It's so big. What do you make of this whole thing?
I don't even know what to say, John. I mean, it was obviously we had a very emotional debate on the statues issue. It's I talked about my own family's history, and like I said, I'm a citizen of the state also, and I feel like everyone's history matters, not just one person's. The idea that people can go and just pull down public property and the police don't intervene, they don't act, and it's very demoralizing. I talked to somebody in Richmond who lived around the corner from the Christopher Columbus statue, which got pulled down a couple nights ago, and it was very frightening. I've talked to people on Monument Avenue, see groups roaming up and down Monument Avenue, spraying graffiti on statues, trying to pull them down, and it's very frightening. There's no police presence, and at the end of the day, you're going to have a situation. People are going to be like, "I'm done with it. I'm not going to live in this town." And that's kind of how it was in the '60s. That's why a lot of people moved out of the cities, and that had a huge impact on American life for the next generation. It's funny that in some ways cities have kind of slowly come back from that, but it took about 40 years, and I'm afraid that's maybe what's happening now. Now, maybe I'm overreading it, but I can tell you I was in Richmond yesterday, and as someone who has lived in Richmond for a good part of my life, as a member of the legislature and as someone who visits there all the time, it was demoralizing, and I've always thought Richmond was a beautiful city, and I didn't recognize it. I literally, just being in Capitol Square was completely empty. Graffiti, profanity scrawled on the walls of the Supreme Court, which is, supposedly our administrative head of our legal community. Just very disturbing. So it's just, I'm not going to say more than that. The situation seems to be playing itself out. Obviously, we passed legislation. We had sort of a very particular idea of how things are supposed to work, and right now that version of democracy is not applicable, apparently.
Well, it's a dead zone here. I've been here a week. As you know, I own businesses here. It's a very vibrant, very special city in a lot of ways. But you're right. I mean, it's a dead zone. Nothing is still open. I guess Friday some things will open. But I mean, I see a lot of signs on stores that say for rent, bankrupt, not bankrupt, but for rent, out of business. Also see signs that said, I went to a place the other day, and it said we're not opening until all the restrictions are gone. Well, I mean, I don't know when that is. So it's sad, but you go downtown and to see the Capitol Square just trashed, graffiti, the burning that went on and the looting in parts of the city that were trying to get revitalized was sad. I mean, to see the window boarded up, it was just sad. I mean, and you're like, okay, I'm buying businesses here. Why am I doing that?
Yeah, if you own property, you're like, I'm out.
It's tough, Chap, and it's not good. I mean, the whole thing is not good. And the police, I guess, LeVar Stoney is telling him to stand down after the tear gas incident. So that gives, I guess, I'm conjecturing, license to those that want to do damage, I guess, right?
Well, I think there's a couple things going on. And first of all, let me say this, and this is my opinion, not fact, but I've heard this from a couple people, and I'm sort of repeating it. I think a lot of what is going on is not coming from people that live in Richmond. Mm-hmm. Okay? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of especially the early violence and destruction, was not from folks that live in Richmond. And that's just from a couple sort of facts that have been passed along to me that I just think there are other people, other concepts at work. So that's number one. Number two, gosh, I can't remember what my other point was going to be, but it's right now. It's a scary time. When I'm in Richmond, I always enjoy being there, going to the grocery store, going to the pub for a drink, playing basketball at the VCU gym. It's a very friendly city. I've never felt uncomfortable. I've never felt unsafe, and that's why this whole thing is very shocking. And pulling down the monuments on Monument Avenue, that's, again, you can pull them all down, and those will be empty spaces for years and years.
Years.
And I don't know who will ever reach consensus on what to put there, but anyways, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I agree with you. I mean, as a business owner here, and I spend a lot of time here when I'm not traveling, it's just sad. And the fact that the police are nowhere to be found, and even the Capitol Police, right? I mean, when could you just go spray paint the Supreme Court building or spray paint Pocahontas and just get away with it? And then the thing is, when you see the graffiti and you see the boards and the glass, you're right. It's very depressing. You look like you're in a war zone. I mean, it's like, this isn't the vibrant city that I know. What happened in 2 weeks, and how does this have anything to do with whatever the objective is of the protest? Chap, I got a couple more minutes. I want to get to schools opening in the fall.
Yeah.
We have a 16-year-old, as you know, my son Joseph. You have children in school, one of them
Yep.
playing football. My son plays baseball. I mean, I read the order 3 times. I have no idea what he's saying other than only 10 kids can go in a school bus. Are we having school in the fall or not? What are we doing?
I can't. It's funny. Lost in sort of all the statutes getting pulled down and people filing lawsuits, and we've had this school reopening plan that is just very cryptic to me. First of all, and this was my original point at the very beginning. The governor did not have power to close the schools. The school system is owned by the school boards. The properties on which the school system sits is owned by the school boards. and none of whom, were part of that process, and most of them now who basically are too scared to stand up and assert their own rights. But, I don't know what's going to happen. And we've had all spring classes canceled, all summer programs canceled, and we've got these buildings just sitting there empty. And we have, presumably all of our personnel getting paid. It has been the biggest collective failure, and no one has stepped up and said, okay, here's what's going to happen. I mean, we see a lot of guidelines. Enough with the guidelines. Tell us what's going to happen. Are we going to go back in so that, we begin prepping for the next fall semester? Teachers have to report back to work at, first week of August or last week of July. Sports are going to start, again, first week of August, last week of July. We're going to have the school buses cleaned, ready to roll. And I think it's simple. I was in a town hall last night in which somebody made the point, well, parents will be scared to send their kids back to school. I agree. And you know what? If they want to do homeschooling or if they want to do an online option, we'll provide that. But we have to provide in-person instruction. We have to make that clear to people. We will have in-person instruction, and it's going to begin at the regular time. And we're going to be guided by statistics and facts, not by what's the latest rumor popping up on MSNBC or whatever website people follow, but look at the actual statistics. The actual statistics show that there were no children that were died of COVID-19 in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that very few have been hospitalized. Those that were almost all dealing with pre-existing illnesses, that there's really no evidence that children have been asymptomatic carriers. Now, people live with elderly relatives. I understand that, and that's a decision they have to make. But this idea that we're going to continue putting our children last without any scientific basis, that's got to come to an end.
It's insane. It's insanity. You can't go another semester without instruction. Our kids are falling behind. In the city of Richmond, where I am now, we're talking about this. This is shocking. This is going to shock you. 2019, 30% of Richmond kids in high school didn't graduate. 30%. Now we're going to, get to 50%? So that it's just like if you got a 50-50 shot of getting out of high school? I mean, this is insane. And
John, it's the ultimate irony that here we spent all this time talking about racial inequality in America, and we spent weeks on it, and yet this whole time we're talking about it, our school systems are shut down.
Sick.
Is anybody talking about that?
No. And I get to Richmond again. 30% of people in 2019 didn't graduate. 94% of those 30, 94% people of color, African American or Hispanic, 6% white. So you want to talk about racial equality? I got to get kids getting a high school diploma. I mean, let's start there. Unbelievable. Now, what about high school football? I got all my son's friends that play football are just beside themselves. You've got seniors trying to get a scholarship.
Right.
Is the season going to get wiped out?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I don't know. The governor hasn't given any guidance on that. And again, how the school system could just let this happen. And I come from a hybrid family. My wife was a field hockey coach. My older daughters played field hockey. My son plays football. Both of those sports would be due to start within weeks.
Yep.
And they'd be going to summer camps right now and getting prepared.
Right.
And everything's been on lockdown. The softball season was canceled in the spring.
Right.
Everyone talks about Title IX. Well, there were no sports for any kids. Okay,
right.
There's your equality. So this has been, it just gets me angry. You're going to make me angry. And like I said, I filed my suit on behalf of small businesses, and then I did that as a lawyer, and I made a point of saying I'm doing this as a lawyer, not as a politician. But I will tell you, as a parent, the whole school situation has been outrageous. It has been disgraceful, and it's an embarrassment that we have allowed this to happen. All the people that we talked about that were Jim Crow, segregation, massive resistance, all those people. Look, there were some bad decisions made, but at least they had a school system. Okay, at least they had a functioning school system, and we don't even have a functioning school system at this point. I mean, it's amazing. We can't even maintain a functioning school system. Let's do that, and then, we can move on. Until you have a functioning school system, I don't even see how you can talk intelligently about, whatever equality progress you want to make. How do you do it without a functioning school system?
You don't.
You don't.
Exactly. And now you're robbing kids of an education. You're robbing them of their athletics. You're robbing them of their dreams. I mean, this is a big deal. The number of kids that play athletics in high school in Virginia, when you take all the sports together, girls and boys, I mean, it is a massive number. And they don't know what they're doing. And the whole thing is sad. And it's causing kids anxiety. I mean, you think about it. If you play football in high school or soccer and you want to go to college on a scholarship or play D1 or D2 ball, and you've worked, you know how it is in football. It's not 3 months. You work 12.
Working the whole year.
You work 12 months. You're working out. You're with your team. You're working on drills. You're working on footwork. You're with your coaches. You're paying for supplemental training. You're watching your diet. You're doing all that. It goes on from when you're 12 years old. It goes on for years. I've seen my son in baseball do it. It's every day, 365. It never leaves. And now you're told, here's your big chance, and we're canceling it because somebody put an edict out that nobody can understand, and if you tackle somebody, you might get COVID, although nobody's died from COVID tackling anybody at your age in the whole state, but yet you're done? I mean, where, how are we even in this place, Chap?
Yeah. I don't know, John. I don't know, and maybe my lawsuit is one small way to kind of turn the corner. Maybe somewhere, somehow, someone else is going to file a similar lawsuit. I mean, maybe somebody's going to, I'm waiting for somebody to file a lawsuit about denial of education. Should have happened this spring. I actually had thought about, I had one prepared. I just, too many other things going on. But these children have a constitutional right to be guaranteed, to be educated, and that's not happening. So, yeah, it's awful.
All right. Senator Chap Petersen, I want to thank you for being with us. As always, thank you for your filing your suit and for fighting for all Virginians that simply want their kids to get a decent education, Chap, and want their businesses to open and be able to put food on the table. Thank you, sir.
Yep. All right, John. We'll talk to you.
All right. We got Tony Angelini coming up. Job Creators Network. Keep it right here.